Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel, AI Era, Islamic and Abrahamic Wisdom.
It's great to be back.
Every great state, every enduring civilization eventually runs into this huge constitutional wall. How do you build a system that maintains justice, that maintains integrity, long after the really good intentions of its founders have faded away?
And how do you make sure that power, which, let's face it, naturally wants to centralize and corrupt, stays accountable forever?
That is the big question, isn't it? And that's exactly what we're tackling today. We're going to be discussing Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir's book, The Foundation of Islamic Jurisprudence.
Specifically, we're in Volume 1, Subvolume 3, which focuses on Hazrat Umar ibn al-Khattab, may God be pleased with him. We're doing a deep dive into Case 8.
And this case dates all the way back to 15 AH, that's 636 CE for you. It details how Hazrat Umar pioneered a truly revolutionary answer to that problem. Institutionalized self-auditing.
That's an incredible piece of history.
It really is. And if you find this kind of deep analysis valuable, please do take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and maybe share it with your friends. It helps us a lot.
It really does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to figure out how Umar created this systematic, independent, and continuous machine for oversight.
An administrative accountability department.
Exactly. Centuries before we were even thinking about things like auditors general or, modern anti-corruption bureaus, we're looking at the very birth of audit governance.
And it's such a critical moment in history. I mean, think about it. By 15 AH, the state wasn't some small local government anymore.
Not at all. It was expanding at an incredible rate.
Its territory, its treasury, the armies, the bureaucracy, everything was growing. And this massive expansion put immense power into the hands of provincial governors and military commanders.
And the Caliph understood something fundamental about that. Success means you have to delegate power, but unchecked power is basically an invitation for systemic failure.
That's the paradox right there. You need good people to run the empire, but you put them far away from the capital, you give them huge authority, and suddenly you've created the perfect environment for ethical decay.
And Umar's insight, according to the sources, it wasn't just about good administration, it was constitutional. He saw that power without oversight. It just corrodes justice.
Precisely. And his focus wasn't, are my current officials good, pious men? He knew many of them were. His focus was on the future.
What institutional safeguards do you need to make sure that future officials, or even the current ones under temptation, stay aligned with justice?
Good intentions are just not a safeguard. They're fleeting. Institutions are what protect a state.
So let's get into the specifics. What were the constitutional risks he was trying to head off? The source actually breaks them down into 4 key dangers. The first one is maybe the most obvious, the corruption of public trust.
Right, and this is the first break. It's psychological. The moment a high office stops being a difficult service and becomes a privilege you can exploit,
The public sees it immediately.
instantly. When a citizen sees their governor using his position to get rich, or to give contracts to his family, or just living in luxury while everyone else struggles, that's it. The idea of fairness starts to crumble.
And their willingness to follow the law goes with it.
It signals that the state is there to serve its own operators, not its citizens. And once that trust is gone, the second danger, impunity, becomes systemic.
Wrongdoing just hides behind rank.
It's a structural guarantee that the most powerful people will get away with it simply because no one below them has the power or, frankly, the political courage to investigate them.
And impunity is a poison, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't just protect one person.
It contaminates the entire chain of command. If the people working for a corrupt governor know he's untouchable, what are their options? They either join in on the corruption or they just look the other way to protect themselves.
You get this circle of protection.
A wall of silence. The law becomes a total abstraction when it comes to the elite.
Which, of course, leads directly to danger number 3, selective justice.
The classic two-tiered system. The weak, the poor, the guy with no connections who commits some small crime. He gets punished fast and hard.
But the powerful official who engages in massive theft or abuses his authority,
He walks free. And that is the ultimate threat to a state that's founded on the principle of equality before the law. It turns the legal system into a tool for controlling the masses, not a guarantor of rights for everyone.
And Umar was dealing with this huge influx of wealth and territory. He must have seen this danger very clearly.
He did. He knew that if the standards of accountability weren't the same for everyone, for the general who just won a huge battle, and for the merchant paying his taxes, then the whole political structure would become hollow.
So you've got corruption of trust, impunity, selective justice. You put them all together and you get the final danger, the total erosion of state legitimacy.
This is the deep systemic crisis. Legitimacy is just the belief among the people that the state has the right to rule them.
A kind of social contract.
Exactly. And when people see that the system is rigged to benefit the insiders, they stop believing in the system itself. They might obey out of fear for a while, but that willing cooperation, that loyalty, it's gone.
And fear is a fragile foundation to build an empire on.
The most fragile. Umar knew that. He was building something to last, and he knew that justice, institutionally guaranteed justice, is what creates deep, lasting loyalty. He was determined to preempt this whole cascade of dangers by building the check right into the system itself.
So he's diagnosed this existential threat. What was the solution? It sounds like it was pretty radical for its time.
It was incredibly radical, the creation of a permanent, dedicated, and centrally controlled administrative accountability department. This wasn't a temporary committee or a quick fix.
It was a constitutional commitment.
Absolutely. And the structural purity of it was everything. I mean, if this new body was going to have the power to challenge the most powerful people in the empire, its credibility had to be flawless.
And that starts with who you pick to lead it.
It starts with the leader. And he chose Muhammad ibn Maslama. The sources make a point of emphasizing his character, his unshakable integrity, his firmness.
So why was that specific choice so critical? Why him?
Because in the early days of any new institution, the character of the person in charge is the institution's credibility. It's everything. If Umar had picked someone who was seen as, politically weak, or someone who owed favors to the governors he was supposed to be investigating,
The whole thing would have been dead on arrival.
completely. Muhammad ibn Maslama was a symbol. His appointment sent a message that this department would be professional, unbiased, and absolutely uncompromising. He was, in essence, the very first inspector general, and his job was to set the precedent for independent scrutiny.
And the success of that role depended on the rules, the structure that guaranteed its independence, what we call horizontal accountability today, the checks and balances.
Right, let's break down those foundational rules. Rule number 1, direct reporting to the caliph.
Simple but powerful.
It sounds simple, but it bypassed the entire administrative food chain. So if Muhammad ibn Maslama was investigating, say, the governor of a huge province like Egypt, his report didn't go through the local administration.
Where it could be buried or watered down.
Exactly. It went straight to Umar. The governor had zero power to intercept it, to edit it, or to influence the findings before they hit the caliph's desk.
That is a direct blow against impunity. Okay, Rule 2 was about its mandate. Broad authority.
Yes, the authority to investigate the highest ranks. We're talking governors and top military commanders.
And this is where the political courage really comes in, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, these weren't minor city officials. These were the pillars of the expanding state. To give an oversight body the power to summon them, audit them, and potentially have them removed, that was a massive statement.
The statement being, no rank, no matter how high or how important you are, gives you immunity from being held accountable.
Not a bit of it. Then you have Rule 3, which ensures impartiality, autonomy. The department was independent of local control. Its agents were sent out from the capital, from Medina.
Why is that detachment so vital?
For objectivity. Think about it. If your audit team has to rely on the local governor for their housing, their transportation, their security, they're compromised before they even open a book.
Of course. They're beholden to him.
By operating as a central, independent unit, they were shielded from all those immediate political pressures and local loyalties. It was the only way they could deliver a truly unbiased report.
And finally, Rule 4, the core function. It wasn't just a research body. It had teeth.
It had real power. The power to summon, audit, and discipline. It could compel witnesses to testify. It could freeze assets. It could demand to see any document. And crucially, its recommendations for removal from office, for restitution of funds, those were binding actions.
So it formalized that necessary friction between the part of government that does things and the part that verifies how they were done.
And you need that friction. It's that tension, that check that's necessary to maintain a high ethical standard across the whole administration.
Here's where it gets really constitutionally interesting for me. This department wasn't just some ad hoc committee Umar created. The sources are clear. It had constitutional authority.
Yes. This made oversight a legally defined function of the state. It turned it from a choice into an obligation.
And that's the difference between governance based on, say, the will of a good leader and governance based on institutional law.
Exactly. By defining the department's role legally, Umar was making sure that the state itself was permanently committed to self-correction. The mandate wasn't up for debate. It wasn't subject to the caliph's mood or political convenience or whether it was a good year for the treasury.
So what were those legally defined responsibilities? Let's get into the details. The first was investigating complaints.
They had a duty to look into every credible allegation of misconduct or, just bad administration. They couldn't just sweep things under the rug because the accused was a powerful man or because an investigation might be embarrassing.
And second, the systematic function of auditing wealth accumulation. This was the proactive part.
That was the preventive measure, designed to stop illicit enrichment before it got out of hand.
Third, they had a mandate to verify administrative conduct. This wasn't just about money, was it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It was about how officials governed. Were they efficient? Were they fair? Were they following the law and how they treated citizens and managed public resources?
And then you get to the outcomes, the executive function. Their job wasn't just to find problems, but to fix them.
Right. So, fourth, they were responsible for recommending removal or restitution, and fifth, for enforcing corrective measures. This could be anything from forcing an official to return stolen funds, to a public warning, to outright dismissal from their post.
The implication for us today is, well, it's profound. By making oversight a mandatory, non-negotiable state obligation, Umar was essentially future-proofing the state's stability. Why does that mandatory part matter so much?
Because it ensures continuity. If accountability is optional, it's the first thing that gets thrown out during a crisis. It's the first thing that gets politicized when an executive wants to consolidate power.
Of course.
By making it a constitutional requirement, Umar was saying that the integrity of the state is more important than anything else, more important than short-term political harmony. It's a legal promise of justice, and that's what makes a state truly trustworthy to its people. He put systemic health above individual comfort.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the tools this department used.
Yeah.
Because some of them feel like they're from the 21st century, not the 7th. The main preventive tool was the system of mandatory asset declarations.
This is foundational anti-corruption architecture. It was designed to preempt illicit enrichment, that rapid, unexplainable pileup of wealth by officials. And the mechanism had two very clear, legally required phases.
Okay, phase one. You declare your wealth when you're appointed.
Right. That establishes the baseline. Every piece of land, every bit of gold, every financial holding, it all had to be cataloged. That was the starting point, the reference for their entire time in office.
And without that starting point, it's almost impossible to track any ill-gotten gains later on.
Impossible. And then came phase two, the enforcement part. Your assets were reassessed when you left the job, whether you resigned, got fired, or were just transferred to a new post. The closing inventory was compared directly to the opening one.
And the sources are really clear on what happened next.
Yeah.
Any unexplained increase.
Any unexplained increase automatically triggered a full, rigorous investigation by Mohammed ibn Maslama's team. There was no discretion there. The tripwire was automated.
This brings us to what feels like the most radical part of this reform. It completely reverses the burden of proof. Normally, the state has to prove you're guilty. How did this flip that on its head?
It shifted the entire weight onto the official. The principle was simple but revolutionary. Officials had to justify their wealth. The public did not have to prove corruption.
Let's break that down. Walk us through a hypothetical example based on how it worked.
Okay, sure. Let's say a tax collector gets appointed to a province. His initial asset declaration shows he's worth, say, 10,000 dinars. A few years later, he's being transferred, and the reassessment shows his assets are now worth 50,000 dinars. That's a 40,000 dinar surplus.
Right.
Now, under a traditional system, the accountability department would have to spend ages trying to find hard proof that this 40,000 came from skimming taxes or taking bribes.
Which is an almost impossible task, especially from a distance.
Exactly. But Umar's system cut right through that. That 40,000 dinar increase is automatically flagged as unexplained. The official is then summoned, and he has to provide verifiable proof, not just stories, of where that money came from.
So he needs to show trade receipts, inheritance documents, salary records.
Something real. Clear, verifiable documentation. If he can't produce it, the presumption holds. The wealth was acquired illegitimately through his public office, and those funds are then seized and returned to the public treasury.
That's genius. It basically forces every official to be their own financial watchdog, creating this constant automatic deterrent.
It just guts the motive for corruption. You might be tempted to steal, but you know you're almost certainly going to lose it when you leave office, and you'll be disgraced and dismissed on top of it.
And as you said, this is the foundation of modern integrity laws all over the world.
It is. By making transparency a condition of public service, it proactively managed the ethical risk that comes with delegating power. Public office was no longer a guaranteed path to getting rich quick.
So asset declarations were the check from the center, the horizontal check. But the system also empowered the people, the check from below, or vertical accountability.
Yes, through a really robust public complaint mechanism. Umar recognized that, central auditors can't be everywhere at once. The people on the ground, they're the real eyes and ears. They're the first to see if a judge is being unfair, or a commander is mistreating soldiers, or a tax collector is shaking people down.
But the perennial problem is, how do you get a regular farmer to complain about a powerful governor without him fearing for his life?
That's the core challenge. And the system addressed it with strict protocols to guarantee access and safety. There were 3 crucial guarantees. First, citizens could complain directly to Medina, directly to the central government.
So you didn't have to go through the local court or the local governor's office, who are probably loyal to the person you're accusing.
You could bypass the entire local power structure, which is often where the collusion and intimidation happens. The Central Accountability Department was the designated recipient.
Okay, what was the second guarantee?
Complaints were handled without intermediaries. This was huge. It meant there was no risk of your complaint being, filtered or lost or watered down by some local official acting as a gatekeeper. The line from the citizen to the central auditor was direct, and it was protected.
And the third guarantee is probably the most important one for getting people to actually participate. They were protected from retaliation.
Absolutely. The sources say the initial investigation was confidential to protect the complainant's identity until the department decided the complaint was credible. But more importantly, if an accused official tried to intimidate or punish a complainant,
That was a separate crime in itself.
a very serious one. It could be grounds for severe punishment, even removal from office, regardless of what the original investigation found. The state guaranteed the safety of the whistleblower. And that completely transformed the relationship between the governed and the governor.
So as a citizen, you know you have a direct, protected line to the highest authority, and there's an independent body ready to act on your word.
And that's the genius of the vertical check. It immediately raised the risk for any official thinking about misconduct. He could never be sure if that person he was about to strong-arm had just sent a message straight to Muhammad ibn Maslama. It essentially deputized every citizen as a constitutional guardian.
We've covered the blueprint and the tools. Let's talk about how this worked on the ground. How did the department keep officials honest when they were hundreds of miles away?
Through constant vigilance. Specifically through inspections and surprise audits.
Right. The operational strategy was built on being unpredictable. They did announce inspections, sure, for systematic reviews, but the real institutional pressure that came from the surprise audits.
Surprise audits are the ultimate integrity test, aren't they? You can't fake it. There's no time to hide the evidence or cook the books.
So what did one of these audits look like?
It was incredibly comprehensive. Of course, they'd review the documents and the financial records, but critically, they did on-site verification. The auditors would actually go and measure the granaries, count the livestock, inspect the public works projects to see if they matched the reported costs.
So you couldn't just file a fake expense report from your province and hope no one would check.
No chance. But even more interesting was the human element. They conducted interviews with local citizens and staff.
The qualitative check.
Exactly. They would talk to ordinary people, not just the local elites, to find out if the governor was accessible, if taxes were fair, if justice was impartial. They'd also interview the governor's own staff to get a feel for the internal culture. This went so far beyond just bookkeeping. It was an audit of the entire ethical climate of the provincial government.
I can only imagine what a terrifying prospect that would be for an official who thought he was untouchable. Just the knowledge that this team could show up at any moment must have changed everything.
It forced a culture shift from complacency to constant compliance. Imagine you're a treasurer in a distant post, feeling pretty secure, and one morning Muhammad ibn Maslama himself walks in unannounced.
The psychological impact alone.
It's immense. That certainty, the knowledge that immediate, unbiased scrutiny is always possible, is what drives real behavioral change. The system policed itself through the pervasive expectation of being audited.
Which brings us to a principle that historians always point to as the most radical part of Umar's rule. Equality before investigation. Rank, history, service, none of it shielded you.
And this is where the theory hits the hard reality of politics. In any state, you get a governing class, the sacred cows, who are seen as too important or too connected to be investigated.
And protecting that class is just a guarantee of future failure.
It's the beginning and the end. But Umar's justification was rooted in that constitutional ethic of justice. His principle was that office increases responsibility and honor increases accountability.
So if a famous general or one of the elite companions was accused, their past service didn't get them a pass.
It subjected them to a higher standard, because their failure would do more damage to the state's reputation. The source is clear. Governors, generals, even the most elite companions were investigated if a credible complaint came in. That must have been a massive shock to the system.
An intentional shock, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It established that trust resides in the system of law, not in the personality of any single official. I mean, if Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the greatest military commanders in history, could be questioned and disciplined, then nobody was above the law.
And that sends a powerful message to the public.
An unmistakable one, that the law applies equally to everyone, at the very top and at the very bottom. This is the moment a state decides if it's going to be governed by the rule of law or by the rule of men.
And by refusing to grant immunity to the elite, Umar reinforced the state's moral authority and, at the same time, constrained the ambitions of the powerful.
Officials learned that their job depended on performance and integrity, not just on their political connections. The political cost of removing a popular but corrupt official was always less than the constitutional cost of letting integrity slide.
Okay, so we have this incredibly powerful, uncompromising department. But that kind of power, even for a good cause, can be dangerous. It could turn into political purges or witch hunts. How did Umar ensure the system stayed firm but also fair? How did he build in due process?
This is the critical safeguard. Accountability is only legitimate if the process itself is fair. Otherwise, it's just another form of tyranny. The sources point to 4 key procedural guarantees that kept it balanced.
Okay, guarantee number 1, allegations were verified.
Absolutely. They couldn't just act on a rumor or a malicious accusation. The auditor first had to do a preliminary check to see if the complaint had any factual basis. This protected officials from baseless smears and stopped the department from wasting its time.
And guarantee 2, evidence was assessed fairly.
This meant building an objective case. They had to rely on verifiable facts, on documents, on corroborated testimony, not on hearsay or political convenience. The burden was on the auditors to present an airtight case.
And the third, which is just foundational to any system of justice, the accused was always heard.
Non-negotiable due process. The official being investigated had the right to present a full defense. They could challenge the evidence, they could explain that surplus wealth, they could provide context for their decisions. This ensured the investigation was about finding the truth, not just confirming a suspicion.
And finally, guarantee 4, the punishment had to fit the crime.
Right. Justice requires proportionality. A minor mistake in bookkeeping shouldn't get you the same punishment as large-scale embezzlement. This ensured the department's actions were seen as targeted institutional repair, not as malicious attacks. If you use excessive punishment, you just destroy morale and hurt the state more than the corruption did. It worked because it was seen as firm, but not arbitrary.
So, when an investigation was over, the goal wasn't just punishment. The sources say the primary goal was institutional repair. What did that look like in practice?
The outcomes were very pragmatic. For, say, minor administrative mistakes, things done without malicious intent, the outcome was often just warnings and specific guidance.
So, correct behavior, don't just punish the person.
Exactly. Educate them on the right procedure, publicly correct them, and let them keep their job as long as they complied. For clear financial misconduct, the priority was restitution of public funds.
Get the money back.
Yes. The main focus was on recovery. Any illegally acquired assets, especially those unexplained surpluses from the declarations, had to be returned to the Treasury immediately. It demonstrated that corruption was financially unprofitable.
And for the really severe violations, abuse of power, massive corruption, the penalty was severe: removal from office.
And that served 2 purposes. It was a punishment for the individual, but it was also a powerful signal to the entire system. It physically removed the source of the rot and showed everyone else that the consequences were absolute.
The source also mentions something interesting for cases where an official was falsely accused. Public clarification.
This was a brilliant move. It protected the reputations of good, loyal administrators. If a governor faced a baseless complaint and the investigation cleared him, the caliph made sure that was announced publicly. It cleared the official's name, restored his authority, and, crucially, protected the integrity of the investigative body itself. It proved it wasn't just a tool for political attacks.
It really is astonishing how sophisticated this system was for the 7th century. If we try to map it onto our world today, what would this accountability department even look like? What does this all mean for us now?
It means the fundamental principles of institutional integrity haven't really changed. You can draw direct lines. Umar's department combined the roles of several modern bodies.
Such as?
Well, it did the financial scrutiny of an auditor general's office. It investigated unexplained wealth and bribery, so it was like a modern anti-corruption commission. And it verified general conduct, so it also acted like a high-level inspectorate.
That's a huge amount of power in one independent body. And what about the public complaint mechanism?
That is the direct ancestor of a modern ombudsman's office, an institution designed specifically to give citizens a safe, direct channel to report government malpractice and get action.
So the takeaway is that Umar implemented the substance of these modern systems: independence, transparency, due process, but without all the bureaucracy we have today.
Exactly. He achieved it through a governing philosophy guided by a powerful constitutional ethic. His system proves that real accountability doesn't depend on fancy technology or a specific political structure. It just depends on the political will to create checks and balances that are truly independent, universally applied, and dedicated to finding the truth.
Which forces us to look at our own modern failures. Why should you, our listener, really care about a 7th century auditing system?
Because the same problems are still here. The erosion of trust we see in so many countries is driven by the exact failures Umar was trying to eliminate. We constantly see selective accountability where investigations only target political opponents.
Or politicized investigations, where the anti-corruption body itself is used as a weapon to settle political scores.
We still have immunity for elites, where money and power give you a pass from serious prosecution. And critically, we have fear-based whistleblowing, where good people stay silent because they're more afraid of retaliation than they are confident in the state's protection.
So Umar's model gives us this timeless blueprint for how to fix these problems. Let's just reiterate those 4 key teachings that are so critical for governance today.
First, oversight must be structurally independent. If the watchdog reports to the person it's supposed to be watching, it's useless. Independence is everything.
Second, asset transparency is non-negotiable. Shifting the burden of proof is essential. Public servants must be able to justify their wealth to the people they serve. It moves the system from reactive punishment to proactive deterrence.
Third, citizens must have a safe way to file complaints. You have to invest in protecting whistleblowers. It's the only way to activate that crucial vertical check. You can't let fear paralyze honest reporting.
And the final lesson, which is so reassuring for any government that wants to last: accountability strengthens authority. It doesn't weaken it.
A system that constantly and fairly corrects itself reinforces its moral contract with the people. It builds loyalty, compliance, and in the end, resilience. Accountability is how a state proves it's committed to justice, and that's what makes its power legitimate.
This deep dive really confirms that the most profound political ideas are often the simplest ones. It leaves us with a pretty provocative thought about power.
It really does. Hazrat Umar demonstrated a truth that applies to every ruler in every era. The strongest state is the one brave enough to investigate itself. The second a government decides that some part of it is untouchable, that's when the rot sets in.
And maybe the greatest legacy of this whole system is that it was designed to outlast him. It was a shift toward trust in law over personalities.
Absolutely. Systems built on the virtue of one person will always collapse when that person is gone. By institutionalizing accountability, by making justice systemic and predictable, Umar ensured that the state itself was reliable, humane, and self-correcting. He secured its endurance for generations.
A truly timeless lesson. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Next time, we're going to shift from accountability inside the executive to another vital principle Umar established: the separation of judicial and executive power.
We'll be looking at Case 9, the Judicial Independence Establishment, a decision that was absolutely critical for guaranteeing the impartial rule of law.
We'll see them for the next deep dive.